The water was colder than James Carter expected. His lungs screamed for air as his fingers clawed through murky darkness, searching for fabric, for flesh, for anything solid enough to pull back toward the surface. He'd been watching Sophie draw her toes through shallow pools only seconds before, her gap-toothed smile bright against the September afternoon, when movement upstream caught his peripheral vision. A woman thrashing where the riverbed dropped away and the current turned vicious. Now he was underwater, drowning while trying to save someone who might already be gone. His hand found silk, expensive material that didn't belong in a Colorado river on a Thursday afternoon. James wrapped his fist around it and kicked upward with everything his 38-year-old legs could give him. They broke the surface together. The woman coughed violently, water streaming from her nose and mouth, eyes wild with an animal panic that made James's stomach clench. Then she started screaming, "Get away from me!" Her elbow cracked against his ribs hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Nails raked across his forearm, drawing blood in 4 parallel lines that burned like fire. "Don't touch me! Somebody help, please!" James kept his grip. The current fought him, tried to drag them both back under, but his work boots found purchase on river rock. He pushed forward through waist-deep water while she twisted in his arms, fighting him harder than the river itself. "Ma'am, I'm trying to—" "Get off!" Water filled her mouth and cut off whatever accusation she'd been shaping. She coughed so hard her whole body convulsed. James's feet finally hit solid ground. He half-carried, half-dragged her the last few yards until the water dropped to his knees, then released her. She scrambled away on hands and knees, crawling onto the muddy bank like something pursued by demons. When she turned back, her face twisted with equal parts terror and fury. "You grabbed me. You grabbed." Her voice shook, rising with each word. You touched me. You had no right." James stood waist-deep in the river, water streaming from his work clothes, arms hanging slack at his sides. Blood ran in thin lines down his dark forearm, where her nails had torn skin. He couldn't find words. The accusation hung in the air between them, ugly and impossible to answer. "Ma'am," his voice came out rougher than he intended. "You were drowning. I pulled you out." "I didn't ask you to." She wrapped her arms around herself, designer blouse plastered to her frame, dark hair hanging in ropes around a face gone pale and shaking. "You can't just—" "Daddy!" The word cut through everything else. James's blood went ice cold. Sophie stood at the water's edge, her small face white with confusion, brown eyes too wide for a 6-year-old. Patricia Scott had her weathered hand on Sophie's shoulder, holding her back, but the damage was done. His daughter had seen everything, heard everything. "It's okay, baby." James forced his voice steady as he started moving toward shore. "This lady she needed help. You stay away from that child." The woman's voice cracked, louder now, edged with something that might have been hysteria. "Don't you dare!" "That's my daughter." The words came out harder than James meant them, anger finally breaking through shock. "And you need to calm down." The woman pressed her hands to her face. For a second James thought she might collapse right there in the mud. Then she dropped her hands and looked past him toward the river, her expression shifting from rage to something closer to despair. "My phone." Her voice went hollow. "My purse. Everything's in the water." James closed his eyes briefly, tried to find patience somewhere beneath the adrenaline and hurt churning through his gut. When he opened them again, Sophie was still staring at him with that confused, frightened look that made his chest ache. "Look," he kept his tone careful, controlled, every word measured. "I don't know what you think just happened here, but I saw you drowning and I helped you, that's all. I'm sorry if I scared you, but—" "Scared me?" She let out a sound halfway between laugh and sob. "You think—" She stopped, pressed her hands to her face again. When she spoke next, her voice was barely audible. "I need to go. I need to— Where's my car?" She staggered to her feet, shoes squelching in mud, and started walking. Not toward the parking lot, just away, unsteady and lost, and leaving a trail of river water behind her. James watched her disappear over the rise toward the road. Every muscle in his body was tight with anger he couldn't release, wouldn't release, not in front of Sophie, never in front of Sophie. He waded out of the water. Sophie ran to him the second his boots hit grass, threw her small arms around his waist. He could feel her trembling through his wet clothes. "Daddy, you're bleeding." "It's nothing, baby girl." He looked down at the scratches on his forearm. They stung, but they were shallow, surface wounds. Unlike whatever had just happened to his reputation in front of his daughter and the one neighbor who'd known him since Linda died. Just some scratches. Why was she so mad? Sophie's voice was small, muffled against his soaked shirt. "You saved her." Patricia Scott approached slowly, her face creased with concern. She'd lived 3 houses down from James for 5 years now, watched Sophie grow from infant to kindergartner, brought them casseroles after the funeral. She knew him, trusted him, but even she looked uncertain now. "James?" Her voice was gentle, the way people spoke when they weren't sure what they were dealing with. "That woman. She was scared out of her mind. Probably doesn't even know what she's saying." "Yeah." James didn't believe it. Fear didn't make you call a man dangerous in front of his 6-year-old daughter. Fear didn't put that particular edge in someone's voice when they told you to stay away from a child. His child. Probably. "You did the right thing." Patricia squeezed his shoulder, her grip firm despite the water soaking through his shirt. "You saved her life." James looked across the park to where the woman had disappeared over the rise. He'd saved her life. And somehow, in the space of 5 minutes, he'd become the villain of her story. The kind of man mothers warned their children about. The kind whose touch was violation instead of rescue. "Come on, Soph." He took his daughter's hand, felt her small fingers wrap around his. "Let's go home." The walk back to the parking lot was quiet. Sophie kept glancing up at him, questions hovering behind her eyes, but she didn't ask them. She'd always been good at reading his moods, too good for 6 years old, already learning to manage the emotions of adults around her, to make herself small and easy when the world felt heavy. Linda would have hated that. Would have hated that their daughter was developing survival skills at an age when the biggest problem should have been whether to color the sky blue or purple. James's truck sat in the small lot, an ancient Ford Ranger that burned oil and made concerning noises but kept running through sheer stubbornness. He lifted Sophie into the passenger seat, made sure her seatbelt was secure, then walked around to the driver's side. His hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. Adrenaline crash, probably, or delayed reaction to nearly drowning while saving an ungrateful stranger who'd looked at him like he was something that crawled out from under a rock. The drive home took 12 minutes. Sophie was silent the whole way, staring out the window at houses that were slowly transforming from working-class modest to young professional renovated. Their neighborhood sat right on the edge of gentrification's creep, caught between what it had been and what it was becoming. James's house, the small 2-bedroom with peeling blue paint he'd bought with Linda 8 years ago when the area was still rough and the price was right, looked increasingly out of place next to the Teslas and remodeled front porches appearing on weekends. Inside, Sophie went straight to the living room corner where she kept her art supplies. Dollar store crayons and copy paper James brought home from the office supply closet at work. Her teacher said she had real talent, the kind that might mean something someday if they could afford proper lessons. Right now, talent meant filling sheet after sheet with scenes from her life, processing the world through color and line in ways she couldn't yet do with words. James peeled off his wet clothes in the bedroom, his movements mechanical, changed into worn jeans and a faded Broncos t-shirt. The scratches on his arm had stopped bleeding but left angry red lines across his dark skin. He dabbed them with peroxide in the bathroom, watched them fizz white, tried not to think about Sophie's face when the woman had screamed at him. When he came back to the living room, Sophie had her drawings spread across the coffee table. James recognized the scene immediately. The river, himself in the water, the woman on the bank. But something was wrong with how she'd drawn it. The woman's face was completely blank. No eyes, no mouth, no features at all. Just empty space where a person should have been. "That's good, Soph." His voice came out rougher than intended. She looked up, studying him with those big brown eyes that were all Linda. Every time James looked at his daughter, he saw his dead wife staring back, and it was both comfort and knife twist. "Are you sad, Daddy?" "No, baby, just thinking." "About the scared lady?" "Yeah." She was really scared. Sophie went back to her drawing, adding purple to the sky even though it had been broad daylight at the river. "Like when I have bad dreams and you have to turn on all the lights." James sat down on the couch, pulled Sophie onto his lap. She came willingly, still clutching her purple crayon, and he wrapped his arms around her small frame and tried to remember how to breathe steady. "Sometimes people get scared, and they don't think straight." The words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "It's not their fault." "But you were helping." "I know." "So why?" "I don't know, Soph. I really don't." She was quiet for a moment, then twisted in his lap to look at him directly. Her face had that serious expression she got when she was working through something complicated. "Miss Patterson says when people are mean, we should give them grace because maybe they're having a bad day." James felt his throat tighten. Miss Patterson was Sophie's kindergarten teacher, a young woman fresh out of college who believed in the inherent goodness of people and hadn't yet had life beat that optimism out of her. "That's right, baby. We give people grace. Even when they don't deserve it," he thought. "Even when they look at you like you're something dangerous and tell you to stay away from your own child. Even when you save their life and they make you feel like a criminal." Sophie seemed satisfied with that answer. She wriggled off his lap and went back to her drawing, adding details to the blank-faced woman with the careful concentration of a child who believed art could fix what words couldn't. James's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, saw a text from Robert Williams at the building where he worked maintenance. "Someone called in sick tomorrow. Can you take their Saturday shift? Double time." James stared at the message. Saturday was supposed to be Sophie's art show at school. He'd promised her 3 weeks ago that he'd be there. Promised he'd see her display her drawings, meet her teacher, be a present father for once instead of the guy who worked 50 hours a week and still barely made rent. But double time was double time. And Sophie had a cardiology appointment in 2 weeks that would cost $800 after insurance. The scratches on his arm stung, reminding him that good intentions didn't pay medical bills. He typed back, "Yeah, what time?" 6 a.m. "Thanks, man." James set the phone down. He'd tell Sophie in the morning. Watch her face fall. Promise they'd go to the next art show instead, even though there wouldn't be a next show until spring. Add it to the list of small disappointments that came with having a father who worked himself half to death and still couldn't give her everything she deserved. By 7 o'clock he'd made grilled cheese sandwiches, Sophie's favorite, and they'd eaten together on the couch while she told him about her day at school. Her best friend Emma had brought in a caterpillar in a jar. The teacher said it would turn into a butterfly. Sophie wanted to know if they could catch a caterpillar too. "Maybe this weekend," James said, even though he'd be working. Even though his weekends were increasingly full of overtime shifts and household repairs he couldn't afford to hire someone else to do. After dinner, he ran Sophie a bath, helped her wash her hair, got her into pajamas covered in stars. Their bedtime routine was sacred. Bath, pajamas, 3 books, lights out by 8:30. He never skipped it, never rushed through it, even on nights when exhaustion pulled at him like an undertow trying to drag him under. Tonight he read Where the Wild Things Are, The Snowy Day, and Corduroy. Sophie's eyes grew heavy halfway through the second book, but she fought sleep like she always did, determined not to miss a single word. When he finally closed the third book and kissed her forehead, she grabbed his hand. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby?" "Tomorrow, can we go to the museum? You promised." His heart cracked straight down the middle. He'd forgotten about the museum. The Natural History Museum downtown that Sophie had been begging to visit for months. He'd promised her last week that Saturday would be their day. "I got called in to work early, Soph. But next week, okay?" "I promise." Her face fell. She didn't cry. She'd learned young not to cry over broken plans, had developed a stoicism that no 6-year-old should need, but the disappointment in her eyes was worse than tears. "Okay." The word came out small, resigned. James sat with her until she fell asleep, his hand in her small one, watching the rise and fall of her chest in the dim glow of her nightlight. The butterfly nightlight that projected purple and blue spots across the ceiling. Linda had picked it out when Sophie was 3. Sophie didn't remember much about her mother. She'd been too young when cancer took Linda piece by piece, but she remembered the butterfly light, refused to sleep without it, cried the one time James had suggested maybe she was too old for nightlights. He didn't move until he was sure she was deep under, her breathing slow and steady, her grip on his hand finally relaxing. Then he carefully extracted his fingers and stood, his knees protesting. 38, and already his body was starting to fail him in small ways. Too many years hauling equipment, climbing ladders, working on his feet all day in a job that paid just enough to keep them housed and fed, but not enough to build any kind of future. In the living room, he cleaned up dinner dishes, folded Sophie's drawings and put them in the box where he saved all her art. Checked the locks on doors and windows twice, like he did every night. The neighborhood was safer now than when they'd moved in, but habits died hard, especially for a single black father raising a daughter in a world that looked at him sideways even when he was just trying to save someone's life. By 10 o'clock he was exhausted, but nowhere near sleep. He made coffee even though it was late, black and strong enough to strip paint, and took it out to the small covered porch off the kitchen. The September night was cool, carrying the first real hint of fall. Stars scattered across the sky, unbothered by the streetlights that had started appearing as the neighborhood upgraded itself. James sat on the wooden steps and let the quiet settle over him. Thought about the woman from the river, wondered if she'd made it home safe, wondered if she was sitting somewhere right now, still shaking, still scared, replaying the moment a strange man's hands closed around her in the water. Wondered what had happened to her to make her react that way, with that particular kind of terror that went beyond normal fear of drowning. He thought about Sophie's drawing, the woman with no face, the lady too scared to have features. He thought about Linda. She'd died 3 years ago last April. Breast cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. She'd fought hard, chemo, radiation, clinical trials that nearly killed her faster than the disease, but in the end, it hadn't mattered. 18 months from diagnosis to hospice, and those last 2 weeks were the worst thing James had ever lived through. Worse than poverty, worse than racism, worse than every hard thing life had thrown at him before or since. She'd made him promise things in that hospice room. Take care of Sophie. Don't stop living. Find someone else when you're ready. Be happy. He'd promised. Meant it when he said it, there in the room that smelled like antiseptic and death, with their daughter asleep in the chair and Linda's hand going cold in his. But 3 years later, he was still here, still alone, still just trying to get through each day without breaking. Work, Sophie. Sleep. Work, Sophie. Sleep. The rhythm of survival that left no room for anything else. Some nights he was okay with that. Some nights he told himself he had everything he needed, a daughter who loved him, a job that paid the bills mostly, a roof that didn't leak too bad. Other nights he felt the weight of loneliness like a physical thing, pressing down on his chest until he couldn't breathe. Tonight was shaping up to be one of those nights. His phone buzzed. James pulled it out, expecting another message from work. Instead, it was a notification from the Ring doorbell he'd installed last year after the Johnsons 2 blocks over got burglarized. Motion detected. He opened the app, squinting at the screen. The camera showed his front porch, empty except for... His heart stopped. A woman stood at his door. Not just any woman. The woman from the river. Soaking wet, shivering, staring at the doorbell camera like she couldn't quite remember how it worked or why she was there. James was on his feet before his brain fully processed what he was seeing. He crossed through the house in 5 strides, checked Sophie's room, still asleep, thank God, then went to the front door and looked through the peephole. She was still there. wet hair plastered to her skull, expensive clothes ruined, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her own body together. As he watched, she raised one hand and knocked. 3 soft taps, hesitant, almost apologetic. Every instinct James had screamed at him not to open that door. This woman had accused him in public, called him dangerous, made his daughter witness what it looked like when someone feared her father for trying to help. And now she was here at his home, at almost midnight on a Thursday, dripping river water on his porch. He should call the police, should tell her to leave, should protect himself and Sophie from whatever this was. But she was shivering. Her lips looked blue in the porch light. And somewhere under the anger and self-preservation, James Carter was still the kind of man who couldn't leave someone standing in the cold, even someone who'd hurt him, even someone who might hurt him again. He unlocked the door, opened it 6 inches, keeping the chain on. She looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara smudged in dark circles underneath. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My car died about a mile up the road. I tried to walk to town, but She gestured vaguely at herself, at the water still dripping from her clothes. "There's no one else. All the houses were dark." "I saw your light." James didn't say anything. Couldn't find words that wouldn't come out angry or accusatory or both. She took a shaking breath. "I know I have no right to ask. After what Her voice broke. "My phone's gone. My wallet. Everything was in my purse and it's at the bottom of the river. I just need to call a tow truck. Please. I'll wait outside. I won't come in. A car passed on the street behind her, headlights cutting through the dark, and she flinched like the sound was a physical blow. The movement was visceral, involuntary, the kind of flinch that came from somewhere deep and damaged. James made a decision he'd probably regret. He closed the door, unhooked the chain, opened it again. Wider this time. "Come in." She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "What? Come in? You're freezing." "I can't. You can wait outside in the cold or you can come inside where it's warm. Your choice." She hesitated, and James could see the war playing out on her face. Pride against need, suspicion against desperation, the ingrained fear of entering a strange man's house at night against the practical reality that she was soaking wet and shivering and had nowhere else to go. Finally, need won. She stepped over the threshold, dripping water on his entry rug. James closed the door behind her, locked it, turned to face her in the dim hallway light. Up close she looked worse than he'd thought. Not just wet and cold, but exhausted down to her bones. The kind of exhaustion that came from more than one bad day. She held herself rigid, like if she relaxed even an inch, she'd shatter completely. "There's a bathroom down the hall." James kept his voice low, aware of Sophie sleeping 2 rooms away. "Clean towels in the cabinet. I'll find you something dry to wear." "I don't need—" "You're dripping on my floor." He didn't make it sound like an accusation, just fact. "Dry off. I'll get clothes." He left her standing there and went to his bedroom. From his dresser he pulled an old flannel shirt, a pair of sweatpants with a drawstring waist. They'd be too big on her, but it was the best he could do. When he came back, she was still in the hallway, looking lost. "Bathroom's that way." He pointed, handed her the clothes. "Take your time. I'll make coffee." She took the clothes with shaking hands. Then, so quietly James almost didn't catch it. "I'm sorry." The words stopped him halfway to the kitchen. "For earlier," she continued, her voice barely audible, "at the river, She stopped, started again. "I have PTSD. 9 years ago, a man attacked me in a parking lot. When you grabbed me in the water, I thought—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't or wouldn't say what she'd thought, what she'd felt, what terror had made her do. "I'm sorry. You saved my life and It's okay." James cut her off before she could say more. He didn't want to hear it. Didn't want the explanation that made her human instead of just the woman who'd humiliated him in front of his daughter. "You don't have to explain." I do. She met his eyes. Hers were gray, he noticed. Pale gray like winter salt. You saved my life. You brought me into your home. And I called you. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. James didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded toward the bathroom again. Go get dry. We'll figure out the rest after. She disappeared down the hall. James heard the bathroom door close, the lock click. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, trying to process what he'd just done, then went to the kitchen and started coffee. His hands were steady as he measured grounds, poured water, pressed the button to start the machine gurgling. Years of routine made it automatic, but his mind was racing, running through scenarios. What if she accused him again? What if Sophie woke up and saw her here? What if this was some kind of setup, some elaborate... He cut the thought off. That way lay paranoia, and worse. The coffee maker hissed and dripped. James pulled down 2 mugs, then stopped. He didn't know how she took her coffee, didn't know anything about her except that she'd been drowning and he'd saved her, and she had PTSD from an attack 9 years ago. 9 years. She'd been carrying that fear for 9 years, and today it had erupted all over a stranger who'd only been trying to help. The bathroom door opened. She emerged wearing his clothes, her wet things bundled in her arms. The flannel shirt hung off her frame, sleeves rolled up 3 times. The sweatpants pooled around her ankles. She looked smaller somehow, younger, vulnerable in a way that made James's protective instincts kick in before he could stop them. Where should I put these? She held up the wet clothes. Dryer's in the laundry closet off the kitchen. She found it, loaded her things. When she came back, James had set her coffee on the small kitchen table along with the cream and sugar. I didn't know how you take it. Black's fine. She wrapped both hands around the mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth through her palms. Thank you. They stood in awkward silence. James leaned against the counter, maintaining distance. She stood by the table, not quite sitting, not quite standing, holding the coffee like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I should call a tow truck, she said finally. It's almost midnight. Most places won't come out until morning. Her face fell. Right, of course. Where'd your car die? About a mile north, Miller Road, I think. There was a low spot where water was still pooled from the storm last week. I thought I could make it through, but the engine just... She made a helpless gesture. Stopped. James knew that spot. The road dipped down between 2 hills, and every time it rained it flooded. City kept promising to fix the drainage. Never did. Car's probably sitting in a foot of water. Even if a tow truck came tonight, they couldn't get to it. Road needs to drain first. She closed her eyes and James saw her shoulders slump. So, I'm stuck until morning at least. When she opened her eyes again, they were wet. She blinked hard, fighting it back. I can pay you. For the clothes, for... I don't want your money. The words came out harder than he meant. James took a breath, softened his tone. I'm not running a charity here, but I'm also not going to charge you for basic human decency. Then what do you want? The question hung between them. James considered it. What did he want? An apology she'd already given? Absolution for the humiliation he'd felt at the river? Some guarantee this wouldn't turn into another accusation, another moment where his kindness got twisted into something ugly? Nothing, he said finally. I want you to dry off, warm up, and in the morning we'll figure out your car situation. I can't stay here. You have somewhere else to go? She didn't answer, just stared into her coffee like it might hold solutions. The couch pulls out into a bed, James continued. It's not fancy, but it's clean. You can sleep there tonight. In the morning I'll drive you to your car, we'll get it sorted, and you can be on your way. That work for you? She looked up at him, something like wonder in her expression. Why are you helping me? After what Because leaving you outside in the cold isn't who I want to be. James set his coffee down. And it's not who I want my daughter to think I am. At the mention of Sophie, her face crumpled. Your daughter. God, what she must think of me. She thinks you were scared, that's all. I was. The admission came out raw, unvarnished. But that's no excuse. James didn't argue. They stood in the quiet kitchen, the coffee maker still hissing softly, the refrigerator humming its constant background drone. Outside, wind picked up, rattling the windows. "What's your name?" James asked. She looked surprised by the question. "Amanda? Amanda Mitchell." "James Carter." He didn't offer his hand, didn't want to make her uncomfortable. "That's Sophie, my daughter. She's 6. She's beautiful. I saw her at the river." "Yeah. How long have you—" Amanda stopped herself. "Sorry, that's none of my business." 3 years. Just me and her since her mom passed." Amanda's eyes went soft with something that looked like genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry." "Thanks." Another silence, this one less awkward, almost companionable. James pushed off the counter. "I'll get you some blankets. Make up the couch." He left her in the kitchen and went to the hallway closet, pulled out sheets that still smelled faintly of the lavender detergent Linda used to buy. A quilt his mother-in-law had made as a wedding gift, stored away for 3 years because James couldn't bring himself to use it after Linda died. Tonight felt like the right time to pull it back into the world. The couch in the living room was old, upholstered in brown fabric that had seen better days but was still solid. James pulled out the bed mechanism with practiced efficiency, spread the sheets corner to corner. Amanda appeared in the doorway, still holding her coffee, still looking like she might dissolve if someone spoke too loud. "You really don't have to do this." "I know." He smoothed the quilt over the mattress, the geometric pattern of blues and greens catching the lamplight. "But I am anyway." She set her coffee on the side table, wrapped her arms around herself. The gesture was becoming familiar, her default position when she didn't know what to do with her hands or her vulnerability. "I don't deserve this kindness." James straightened, looked at her directly. "Maybe not, but you're getting it anyway. That's how grace works." Her breath caught. For a second he thought she might cry. Instead, she just nodded once, sharp, like she was filing away information for later processing. He showed her where the bathroom was again, even though she already knew, got her a spare toothbrush still in its package from the bulk pack he bought at Costco. Showed her how to lock the front door from the inside, where the light switches were, how to work the TV remote if she couldn't sleep. "I'll be up at 5, he said. "Work early shift tomorrow, but I'll be quiet. You can sleep as long as you need. I'll be gone before you wake up. Your car's underwater. You're not going anywhere." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it as reality settled in. No car, no phone, no wallet. Stranded in a stranger's house because she'd driven through a flooded road and ended up at the one door that opened for her. James headed toward his bedroom, then paused at the doorway. Looked back. "Amanda." She turned. "The locks on the bathroom door work fine, and my bedroom door locks from the inside too. You're safe here. I promise you that." Her eyes filled. She blinked hard, nodded. "I believe you." James went to his room, closed the door, stood with his back against it for a long moment. Wondered what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. Changed into sleep clothes, brushed his teeth, checked on Sophie one more time. Still sleeping sound, patches tucked under her chin, her breathing slow and even. When he finally climbed into bed, exhaustion pulled at every muscle, but sleep stayed distant. He lay in the dark, listening to the house settle around him. Thought about the woman in his living room, the woman who'd called him dangerous and then showed up at his door asking for help. The woman who'd looked at him with fear and then with something that might have been trust. Thought about Linda. What she'd say about all this. She'd probably laugh, that warm laugh of hers, tell him he had a savior complex the size of Colorado, kiss his forehead and call him a good man, even though he never quite believed it. He didn't feel like a good man tonight. Felt tired and confused and like maybe he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or maybe the only choice that let him look at himself in the mirror tomorrow. But he'd meant what he said about Grace. You gave it even when people didn't deserve it, especially when they didn't deserve it. Because Grace wasn't about deserving. It was about being human in a world that made it too easy to be anything else. At some point he must have slept, because the next thing he knew, his alarm was shrieking and pale pre-dawn light was seeping through the curtains. Friday morning, September 14th, 5 o'clock sharp. James silenced the alarm, lay still gathering himself for the day ahead. Then he got up, dressed in his work uniform, navy coveralls with his name stitched over the pocket in yellow thread, and went to the kitchen as quietly as he could. The living room was dark. He couldn't tell if Amanda was awake, didn't want to check and risk waking her if she wasn't. He made coffee, toasted bread, ate standing at the counter while checking his phone. No messages. Good. By 5:30 he was ready to leave. He scribbled a note on the pad they kept by the phone. Coffee in the pot. Help yourself to breakfast. Call if you need anything. Left his cell number at the bottom, set it on the kitchen table where she'd see it. Checked on Sophie one last time. Still asleep, her small chest rising and falling in the rhythm that had kept James sane through 3 years of single fatherhood. He kissed her forehead, careful not to wake her, then let himself out the back door. The morning was cold and clear, stars still visible in the western sky while the eastern horizon grayed toward sunrise. James climbed into his truck, turned the key, listened to the engine cough and complain before finally catching. He'd be back by 3 to get Sophie from after-school care. Until then, Amanda Mitchell was on her own in his house. He tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong as he backed out of the driveway and headed toward work. The building was a 12-story glass and steel monument to corporate ambition in downtown Denver. James had worked there for 9 years, knew every pipe and wire and hidden maintenance closet better than he knew his own home. He parked in the employee lot, grabbed his toolbox from the truck bed, took the service elevator up to start his rounds. Robert Williams found him on the 3rd floor at 6:30, replacing a ballast in the conference room. Robert was 62, had been doing maintenance work since before James was born, had the kind of weathered face that came from seeing everything twice and being surprised by none of it. "Heard you pulled someone out of the river yesterday." James's hands stilled on the wiring. "How'd you hear that?" "Patricia Scott called my wife last night. They're in the same book club." Robert leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Said the woman you saved wasn't too grateful about it." "She was scared." James went back to work, not looking up. "PTSD from something that happened years ago, wasn't about me." "Patricia said she screamed at you in front of Sophie." "Yeah. You okay?" "I'm fine." Robert was quiet for a moment, the kind of silence that said he didn't believe James but wasn't going to push. Finally, "Got a situation in the parking garage. Sprinkler head gave up the ghost, flooding 3 spots." James gathered his tools. "Lead the way." They spent the next 2 hours shutting off water, mopping, setting up industrial fans to dry the concrete. By the time James climbed back upstairs, his coveralls were soaked, and it was nearly 9. His phone showed 4 new messages. The first was a photo. Sophie at the kitchen table, gap-toothed grin wide, holding up a plate of pancakes shaped like, he squinted at the screen, maybe a bunny. Hard to tell. The second message, she insisted on ears. The third, "We're going to try fishing after school if that's okay, just at the park." The fourth, "I promise I'll keep her safe." James leaned against the wall in the utility corridor, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and looked at the photo of his daughter. Sophie's eyes were bright, her smile genuine. She looked happy in a way that had nothing to do with managing her father's emotions or making herself small to fit the space available. He sent back, "Fishing sounds good. There's gear in the hall closet." Then, because he couldn't help himself, "Thank you." The rest of the morning passed in the rhythm of small repairs that kept buildings functioning, replacing outlet covers, tightening loose doorknobs, checking HVAC filters. Mindless work that left too much room for thinking. James thought about Amanda in his house, wondered what she and Sophie were talking about, wondered if Sophie was asking questions he should have answered first, wondered if he'd just made a mistake that would take years to understand. At noon, he ate lunch in the break room, leftover chicken and rice he'd packed the night before, while Robert held court with the other maintenance guys. They were complaining about the new building manager who wanted everything done yesterday and didn't understand that 40-year-old infrastructure couldn't be fixed with thoughts and prayers. James's phone buzzed mid-bite. Another photo. Sophie holding a fishing rod, concentration fierce on her small face, her tongue poking out between her teeth the way it did when she was focused. Amanda was visible at the edge of the frame, crouched beside her, hands guiding Sophie's grip. The message, "She's a natural." James saved the photo before he could think better of it. Added it to the collection on his phone. Hundreds of images of Sophie growing up in small moments he'd tried to capture before they slipped away forever. By 3 o'clock, he'd cleared his work orders and clocked out. Robert had approved overtime for tomorrow, which meant another early morning, another day of Sophie in after-school care instead of with him. The guilt sat heavy as James drove home, mixing with exhaustion and something else he couldn't name. The house was empty when he arrived, a note on the kitchen table in handwriting he didn't recognize. Took Sophie for ice cream after fishing, back by 6. James stood in his kitchen feeling the silence press against him. The coffee pot was clean, rinsed and put away. The pancake pan sat in the drying rack, spotless. Someone had swept the floor. He checked Sophie's room and found her bed made, something he usually had to remind her about 3 times. Her drawings were stacked neatly on her desk, the newest one on top. James picked it up. Sophie had drawn 3 figures, one tall and dark-skinned labeled Daddy in her careful print, one small holding a fishing rod labeled Me, and one with long dark hair crouched beside the small figure. No label on the third person, but she had a smile now. Sophie had given the scared lady from the river a smile. James set the drawing down like it might shatter if he handled it wrong. They came home at 5:45, voices carrying through the front door before it opened. Sophie burst in first, words tumbling over themselves faster than her mouth could shape them. "Daddy, Daddy, I caught 3 fish. Well, 2 were really small, so Miss Amanda said we should throw them back, but one was this big." She spread her hands wide enough to hold a whale. "And she took a picture. Do you want to see?" Amanda followed more slowly, carrying the fishing gear, looking uncertain in a way that made James's chest tight. She'd changed back into her own clothes, dry now, though wrinkled, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger than whatever age she actually was. "Let me put this stuff away first, Soph." "But Daddy." 5 minutes. Go wash up for dinner." Sophie raced off toward the bathroom. Amanda stood in the entryway holding James's tackle box and the old rod he'd inherited from his grandfather when he was 16. Something about the scene felt wrong and right in equal measure. This stranger holding pieces of his past, integrated into his present like she'd always been there. "You didn't have to do all this." She met his eyes. "I wanted to." "She's—" Amanda stopped, seemed to search for words. "She's remarkable. You've done an incredible job with her." The compliment landed harder than it should have. James took the fishing gear from her, their fingers brushing briefly, and he saw her register the contact without flinching. Progress, maybe, or just exhaustion lowering her guard. "Did she ask you questions? About earlier?" "She asked why I was scared. I told her I had a bad experience a long time ago, and sometimes my brain remembers it at the wrong times." Amanda's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "I told her you were very brave to help me even though I didn't react well. She said you're always brave, that it's your job to fix things." James felt something crack in his ribs. "She said that?" Word for word. A smile flickered across Amanda's face, there and gone. "She also informed me that purple is the best color. Rabbits are better than cats. And her mom is watching from heaven and making sure everyone's okay." The mention of Linda stopped James cold. "She told you about her mom?" "Only that she's gone, that she had pretty eyes like Sophie's, that she made the best cookies." Amanda's own eyes were wet now. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "It's okay." James surprised himself by meaning it. "She doesn't talk about Linda much. I'm glad she felt comfortable with you." Sophie reappeared, hands still damp from washing. "Can Miss Amanda stay for dinner, please?" James looked at Amanda. She looked back, something vulnerable in her expression that made her seem younger than she probably was. "If your dad's okay with it." "I'm making spaghetti," James heard himself say. "Nothing fancy. I like spaghetti." So Amanda stayed. She helped Sophie set the table while James cooked, the two of them moving around his small kitchen with surprising ease. Sophie chattered about school. Emma had brought in another caterpillar, this one already making a cocoon, while Amanda asked questions that suggested she was actually listening, actually interested in the minutiae of 6-year-old life. They ate together at the table that usually only sat two. Sophie monopolized the conversation, telling Amanda about her teacher, Miss Rodriguez, who had the longest hair in the whole world, about the boy named Tyler who always stole erasers, about the book they were reading in class with a girl who could talk to animals. Amanda listened like Sophie was recounting the secrets of the universe, asked follow-up questions, laughed at the right moments. When Sophie accidentally knocked over her water glass, Amanda was on her feet with paper towels before James could move, cleaning it up like spills were just part of the deal. No big thing. After dinner, Sophie wanted to show Amanda her art supplies. James cleaned up while their voices drifted from the living room. Sophie explaining her system for organizing crayons by color family, Amanda genuinely interested in the distinction between magenta and regular pink. By the time he joined them, Sophie had spread her recent drawings across the coffee table like evidence. "This one's from when we went to the zoo. That's supposed to be a giraffe, but it looks more like a horse with a really long neck." Amanda studied it with the seriousness it deserved. "I think it looks exactly like a giraffe. See how you captured the spots? And this one's from my dream about flying. And this one's the tree fort Daddy says we'll build someday when we have money." James felt Amanda glance at him but kept his eyes on Sophie, watching his daughter share her world with someone who seemed genuinely interested in entering it. "And this one," Sophie picked up the drawing from earlier, the 3 figures. "This is today. That's you." Amanda took the paper with careful hands. Her expression shifted, something raw crossing her face. "You gave me a smile. Because you're not sad anymore." Sophie's logic was unassailable. "At first you were the lady with no smile, but now you smile a lot, so I fixed it." Amanda pressed her lips together, fighting something. When she spoke, her voice came out rough. "Thank you, Sophie. That's the nicest thing anyone's done for me in a very long time." By 7:30, Sophie's energy was finally flagging. James started the bedtime routine. Bath, pajamas, 3 books. Tonight Sophie requested Where the Wild Things Are, The Rainbow Fish, and a book about a mouse who wanted to be an astronaut. Amanda stayed in the living room, but when James came back after the first book, she was standing in the hallway outside Sophie's room, listening. He paused mid-step. She looked caught, like someone who'd been discovered doing something they weren't sure was allowed. "Sorry, I've never heard anyone read like that before." "Like what?" "Like you really care about every word. Like the story matters more than just getting through it." James didn't know what to say to that. He went back into Sophie's room, read the second book. When he came out again, Amanda was still there. "You can come in if you want." She hesitated only a second before following him into the small room with its purple butterfly nightlight and walls covered in Sophie's artwork. Sophie was already half asleep, patches tucked under her arm, but she perked up when she saw Amanda. "Miss Amanda, are you staying?" "Just for the last story." James read about the astronaut mouse while Sophie fought to keep her eyes open. Amanda sat in the chair by the window, hands folded in her lap, face soft in the dim light. When James got to the part where the mouse finally reached the stars, he looked up to find Amanda wiping her eyes. Sophie was out before he finished. He kissed her forehead, pulled the blanket up to her chin, motioned for Amanda to follow him out. In the hallway, she stopped him with a hand on his arm. Light touch, barely there, but he felt it like electricity. "That was beautiful. The way you are with her, it's—" She dropped her hand. "You're a really good father, James." He didn't know how to respond to that kind of honesty delivered in a whisper outside his daughter's bedroom door. So he just nodded and led her back to the living room. They sat on the couch, careful distance between them, and the house settled into quiet. Outside a dog barked, a car passed, normal sounds of a Friday night in a neighborhood where people went to bed early and got up to work. "I should go." Amanda said it but didn't move. "Where?" "I don't know. A hotel, maybe. My car's still flooded, but I can call an Uber, get somewhere with a phone charger, figure it out. Or you could stay another night, until your car's actually drivable." She looked at him, really looked, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't have obvious pieces. "James, you don't owe me anything. You've already—" "I know I don't owe you. I'm offering because I want to." "Why?" It was a fair question. James considered it, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. "Because Sophie likes you. Because you spent today taking care of my daughter when you didn't have to. Because I think maybe you need somewhere safe to figure things out. And for whatever reason, this is safe for you." Amanda's eyes went bright. She blinked hard, looked away. "I don't deserve this." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true. I accused you of—" She couldn't finish. "Why aren't you angry with me?" "Who says I'm not?" That made her look back at him. James held her gaze, let her see whatever was in his face, the exhaustion, the confusion, the strange acceptance of circumstances he hadn't chosen but was living with anyway. "I was angry at the river. When you screamed at me in front of Sophie, I was furious. I wanted to yell back, to tell you exactly what I thought of people who—" He cut himself off. "But anger doesn't fix anything. And you apologized. You explained. You showed me today that you're trying to make it right. So either I stay angry forever, or I choose to let it go." "Just like that?" "It's not just like anything. It's a choice I make every time I think about what happened. Some moments it's easier than others." Amanda pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them, made herself smaller. When she spoke again, her voice had gone flat, reciting facts instead of feeling them. 9 years ago, I was walking to my car after working late. It was a Thursday. I remember because I was supposed to have dinner with my sister, but I'd canceled to finish a presentation. She paused, swallowed. A man grabbed me from behind in the parking garage, put a hand over my mouth, dragged me between cars. James felt ice spread through his veins. He didn't speak, didn't move, just listened. I fought, screamed when I could. Someone heard, a security guard doing rounds. The man ran. I was— She swallowed again, harder. I got lucky. It didn't go as far as it could have, but 9 years later I still can't. When you grabbed me in the water, all I felt was his hand on my mouth. All I saw was the parking garage. All I knew was I had to get away. Amanda, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand. It's not an excuse, but it's the reason. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that my trauma became your problem. James shifted on the couch, angling toward her. Your trauma is not a problem. It's a thing that happened to you. A terrible thing. And you survived it. Barely. You're here. That's surviving. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Is it? Because most days it doesn't feel like surviving. It feels like drowning. Like I've been underwater for 9 years and every breath is a fight. The word choice hit James like a fist. Drowning. She'd used it before, that first night. And suddenly the river made horrible, perfect sense. Is that why you were in the water? Were you trying to— No. She shook her head hard. No, I needed to breathe. I'd been at a conference for 3 days, presenting, networking, being the successful CEO everyone expected, and I was driving home and I couldn't. I pulled over at the river because it looked peaceful. I thought I'd sit by the water for 5 minutes, clear my head, Then go back to my empty apartment and my empty life and everything would be fine. But you didn't just sit. I took off my shoes, walked in. The water was cold and it felt real, like the first real thing I'd felt in months. So I went deeper. I wasn't trying to drown. I was just trying to feel something other than numb. She looked at him. And then I slipped. And then I actually was drowning. And then you saved me. And then you spent today making pancakes for my daughter. A real laugh this time, wet but genuine. Yeah, that wasn't where I expected my week to go. They sat in silence for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. The house creaked as it settled. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. You said CEO. You run a company? Ran, past tense. Amanda unfolded herself, sat up straighter. I gave notice this morning. Called my board. Recommended my COO for the position. Offered to stay through transition if needed. James stared at her. You quit? I quit. Because of the river? Because of a lot of things. The river was just the final sign I'd been ignoring all the others. She met his eyes. I've spent 15 years building a company I don't even like, working 70-hour weeks for bonuses I don't spend because I have no time to spend them. I have a corner office in Denver and I can't remember the last time I looked out the window. What does your company do? Corporate consulting. We help other companies restructure, streamline, maximize efficiency. The words came out bitter. We make rich companies richer by telling them which employees they can afford to fire. That why you quit? Part of it. Mostly I quit because I realized I've been performing for so long I forgot what it feels like to just be. She gestured at the room, at everything around them. Today with Sophie, that was the first time in years I wasn't trying to be someone. I was just there, present, and it felt like being alive. Yeah. James surprised himself by understanding exactly what she meant. How did you know? Because I know what it's like to go through the motions. After Linda died, I spent 2 years just existing, getting up, going to work, taking care of Sophie, going to sleep, repeat. It wasn't living, it was surviving, and there's a difference. When did it change? I don't know if it has yet. Some days are better than others. Some days I wake up and remember how to be happy. Other days, I'm just here. Amanda nodded slowly. That's honest. It's all I've got. Another silence, but this one felt different, companionable almost. Then Amanda spoke again, quieter than before. My ex-husband used to say I was married to my career, that I loved my company more than I loved him. I told him he was wrong, but after he left I realized he was right. The company was the one thing I could control, the one thing that couldn't hurt me if I worked hard enough. Did it work? For a while, until I was standing in a river wondering how I'd gotten so far from anything that mattered. She pulled her knees back up. You want to know what the worst part is? I don't even know what does matter anymore. Family, I guess, but I don't have that. Friends? I have colleagues, acquaintances, people I network with, but no one who'd notice if I disappeared. James thought about that, about loneliness so complete it made you invisible. Sophie noticed you. Sophie's 6, and she saw what took me hours to see, that you're not scary, you're scared. There's a difference. Amanda's breath caught. She pressed her palms to her eyes, fighting tears that came anyway. I'm so tired, James. I'm tired of being strong, tired of having everything together, tired of performing. Her voice cracked. I just want to rest. Is that okay? Am I allowed to just stop? The question broke something in James's chest. He knew that exhaustion, knew what it felt like to carry weight for so long your bones started to buckle. You're allowed. He said it like giving permission for something that shouldn't need permission. You're allowed to rest, to stop, to figure out what you actually want instead of what everyone expects. She dropped her hands. Tears tracked down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. What if I don't know what I want? Then you take time to find out. No pressure, no timeline. Just space. Is that what you did after Linda? I didn't have a choice. I had Sophie. She needed me functional, so I functioned. But finding what I wanted beyond that? James shook his head. Still working on it. Amanda was quiet for a long moment. Then, have you dated? Since? No. Why not? Because I work 50 hours a week and raise a 6-year-old, and at the end of the day, I'm too tired to be interesting to anyone. He said it without self-pity, just fact. Also because the idea of letting someone into our life, Sophie's life, and having them leave, I can't do that to her, or to myself. So you're alone. I have Sophie. But you're alone. James didn't answer. Couldn't argue with truth that cut clean through his careful justifications. His phone buzzed, breaking the moment. James pulled it from his pocket, saw Dorothy's name on the screen. His mother. Calling at almost 9 on a Friday night, which meant something was wrong. Mom? James, baby. I'm sorry to call so late. Her voice was strained, tight with pain. I've been having chest pains since this afternoon. Thought they'd pass, but they're getting worse. Can you take me to the hospital? Everything else disappeared. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Have you called 911? No, I don't want to make a fuss. Mom, call 911 right now. I'm on my way. He ended the call, was already standing, already moving toward the door. Amanda stood too, her face shifting from confused to understanding in the space of a heartbeat. What's wrong? My mother, chest pains. I have to... He looked at Sophie's closed door. I have to go, but Sophie... I'll stay with her. Go. You don't have to... James, go. He grabbed his keys, his wallet, was halfway out the door when he turned back. Amanda stood in the middle of his living room looking solid and certain in a way that made something in his chest ease despite everything. If she wakes up, I'll tell her you had to help Grandma Dorothy, that you'll be back as soon as you can. We'll be fine. James nodded, unable to find words for the gratitude flooding through him. Then he was out the door, running to his truck, heart pounding as he backed out of the driveway too fast and headed toward his mother's house across town. The drive took 18 minutes. An ambulance was already there when he arrived, lights painting the quiet street in rotating red and blue. Paramedics were loading Dorothy onto a stretcher, her face gray in the harsh fluorescent work lights, oxygen mask over her nose and mouth. I'm her son. The paramedic, young, efficient, kind eyes, nodded. We're taking her to Denver General. You can follow or ride with us. I'll follow. At the hospital, they took Dorothy straight back, left James in the emergency waiting room with forms to fill out and insurance cards to present, and the crushing weight of not knowing whether his mother was dying while he spelled her maiden name for the 3rd time. By midnight, they let him see her. She was in a bed in the cardiac unit, hooked up to monitors that beeped steadily, an IV in her arm feeding clear fluids into her vein. She looked small against the white sheets, vulnerable in a way James had never seen his mother look before. Her eyes opened when he approached. Even through the exhaustion and fear, Dorothy Carter managed to look stern. Don't you dare take money from that woman. James blinked, thrown by the non sequitur. What woman? Lily told me about the pancake lady when I called this afternoon. Dorothy's voice was weak but determined. I know that sound in your voice when you talk about someone. Don't you dare let her pay for this. Mom, what are you... Promise me. Whatever this costs, you handle it yourself. I won't have my son owing some white woman money because his mother's heart gave out. Your heart didn't give out, and nobody's paying for anything yet. Let's just see what the doctors say. But even as he said it, James knew from the serious faces of the nurses, from the way the cardiologist had looked at Dorothy's charts, from the institutional smell of this place that meant serious business. The cardiologist came in at 1 a.m., Dr. Sarah Kim, 40-ish, competent, matter-of-fact in the way doctors got when the news was bad but manageable. Mrs. Carter had a minor heart attack. Not massive, but significant enough that we need to address the underlying issue. You have severe blockage in 3 coronary arteries. You need bypass surgery. Dorothy closed her eyes. When? Within 2 weeks. Sooner if possible. How much? Dr. Kim glanced at James, then back at Dorothy. I'll have someone from billing come talk to you, but with insurance you're probably looking at $80,000 to $90,000 out of pocket. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. James felt his stomach drop. $80,000. $90,000. He made $42,000 a year before taxes. We'll figure it out. The words came out automatically, a promise he had no idea how to keep. After Dr. Kim left, Dorothy reached for James's hand. Her grip was weak, her palm cold. I'm sorry, baby. Don't apologize for having a heart attack, Mom. I'm apologizing for being expensive, for adding to what you're already carrying. You're not expensive. You're my mother. We'll handle it. Dorothy studied his face with eyes that had known him for 38 years, that could read every lie and truth he'd ever tried to hide. The pancake lady, she's staying with you? Just until her car gets fixed. James Anthony Carter. Even weak and scared, Dorothy could deploy his full name like a weapon. Don't lie to your mama. She's staying because you let her in. Because that's who you are. And I'm scared you're going to do what your father did. What's that? Work yourself to death trying to prove you're worth the air you breathe. Her eyes filled. Your daddy died at 52. Stroke at his desk because he couldn't slow down, couldn't admit he needed help, couldn't let anyone see him weak. And I see you heading the same direction. I'm not Dad. No, you're harder on yourself than he ever was. At least he could admit when he was tired. You just keep going until you break. She squeezed his hand. Who's this woman, James? Really? Her name's Amanda Mitchell. She's... James paused, trying to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. She needed help. I helped, that's all. Sophie likes her? Yeah, they went fishing today. And you like her? I don't know her well enough to like or not like. That's not what I asked. James met his mother's eyes, saw the fear there, but also the love, the bone-deep concern that came from watching your child struggle and knowing you couldn't fix it for them. She's good to Sophie. She's good to me. That's all I know right now. Dorothy nodded slowly. Okay. But James, don't you dare take her money for my surgery. I mean it. I won't have that on my conscience. We'll talk about it when you're feeling better. We'll talk about it now. Promise me. Mom, promise me, or I swear I'll get out of this bed and walk home. James sighed. I promise. No money from Amanda for your surgery. Dorothy relaxed back against the pillows, satisfied. Good. Now go home to your daughter. Tell her Grandma's okay. And tell the pancake lady thank you for watching Sophie. Her name's Amanda. I know. But pancake lady is more fun. A ghost of Dorothy's usual humor flickered across her face. Go on. I'm not dying tonight. James left the hospital at 2 a.m. with his mother's promise that she was stable and her surgery scheduled for 2 weeks from today, Friday, September 27th. He drove home through empty streets, his mind spinning through impossible math. $90,000. Sophie's next cardiology appointment would cost $800. Rent was due in a week. The truck needed new tires. Everything cost money he didn't have, and now this. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. He let himself in as quietly as possible, found Amanda asleep on the couch still in her day clothes, a book open on her chest. She woke when he closed the door, sat up disoriented. How is she? Alive. Needs bypass surgery. 3 arteries. James slumped against the wall, suddenly too exhausted to stand. $91,000 after insurance. Amanda went very still. James, don't. He cut her off before she could offer. My mother made me promise not to take money from you, so please don't offer because I can't accept, and I'm too tired to argue about it. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but there are other ways to help that don't involve money. Like what? Like me staying here while you figure this out, so you don't have to pay for childcare. So Sophie has someone when you're working overtime. She stood, moved closer, but not too close. Let me help the way I can. Please. James wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the independence that was the only thing he'd ever had full control over. But he thought about Sophie waking up to an empty house, about scrambling to find someone to watch her while he worked extra shifts, about Dorothy in a hospital bed making him promise not to take help he desperately needed. Okay. The word came out rough. You can stay, until we figure out what comes next. Amanda's expression softened. Thank you. For what? For letting me help, for trusting me with Sophie, for... She gestured helplessly. For not sending me away when you have every reason to. James didn't know how to respond to that. So he just nodded and headed toward his bedroom, every muscle in his body screaming for sleep he probably wouldn't get. As he passed Sophie's room, he looked in, saw his daughter sleeping peacefully, Patches tucked under her arm, completely unaware that the world was shifting around her again, that her grandmother was sick, that a stranger had become familiar in the space of 2 days, that her father was drowning in debt and exhaustion and trying desperately to keep his head above water. He closed his eyes, took a breath, kept walking. Tomorrow, he'd figure out how to pay for a surgery he couldn't afford. Tomorrow, he'd explain to Sophie why Grandma was in the hospital. Tomorrow, he'd navigate whatever strange arrangement he'd just agreed to with a woman he barely knew but was starting to trust anyway. Tonight, he just needed to sleep. Saturday morning came too early. James woke at 5 out of habit, lay in the dark listening to the house breathe around him. Every part of his body ached, muscles, joints, the space behind his eyes where exhaustion lived. He thought about calling in sick, spending the day with Sophie, but double-time wages meant an extra $300 toward a surgery that cost $91,000. The math didn't work, but he had to try anyway. He dressed in the dark, made coffee strong enough to strip paint, found a note on the kitchen counter in Amanda's handwriting. I'll take Sophie to her art show at school. Don't worry about us. The art show. James had forgotten again. He stood holding the note, feeling like the worst father in Colorado, then crumpled it and threw it in the trash before Sophie could see evidence of another broken promise. At the building, Robert found him replacing ceiling tiles on the 8th floor. You look like hell. Didn't sleep much. Dorothy okay? She needs surgery, expensive surgery. Robert was quiet for a moment, the kind of silence that came from a man who'd worked manual labor for 40 years and understood exactly what expensive medical bills meant to people like them. Finally, how much are we talking? More than I have. James? I'll figure it out. He cut Robert off before the older man could offer money he probably didn't have either. Always do. But that was a lie, and they both knew it. Some problems couldn't be solved with overtime and determination. Some problems required miracles or surrender, and James had never been good at either. His phone rang at noon. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe. Mr. Carter? This is Principal Anderson from Riverside Elementary. There's been an incident with Sophie. We need you to come pick her up. James's heart stopped. What kind of incident? Is she hurt? She's fine physically, but there was a situation on the playground and she's been suspended. I'd prefer to discuss the details in person. He was moving before she finished talking, telling Robert he had an emergency, grabbing his keys, running for the truck. The drive to Sophie's school took 7 minutes that felt like 70. His mind spun through possibilities, each worse than the last. The principal's office smelled like industrial cleaner and fear. Sophie sat in a chair too big for her, Patches clutched tight against her chest, face streaked with tears. When she saw James, she launched herself at him with a sob that tore through his chest. "Daddy, I didn't mean to. Tyler said... He said Miss Amanda wasn't my real mom and she was just pretending because... The words dissolved into crying too hard to speak. James held her, rage building hot and dangerous in his throat. Over Sophie's head he saw Principal Anderson, a thin woman in her 50s who'd always been kind to them, standing with a man in an expensive suit. The man had a familiar sneer on his face, the kind that came from never being told no. "Mr. Carter?" Principal Anderson's voice was careful, walking on eggshells. "Perhaps we should speak privately. Perhaps you should tell me what happened to my daughter." The man in the suit spoke before Anderson could answer. "Your daughter attacked my son, pushed him down, made his nose bleed. We're considering whether to press charges." James felt his jaw lock. The words came out ice cold. "Sophie's 6 years old. Old enough to know not to hit other children." "Mr. Harris." Principal Anderson stepped between them, her hands up like she was separating fighters. "Let's all take a breath. Sophie, can you tell your father what happened?" Sophie's voice was small against James's chest, muffled by his work shirt. "Tyler said Miss Amanda was just playing pretend family because real moms don't leave. He said she'd get bored and go away like Mommy did. And I told him to stop, but he kept saying it, so I pushed him." James looked at the man, Harris, and saw the kind of certainty that came with money and whiteness and never being questioned, saw the face of someone who believed his truth was the only truth that mattered. "Your son bullied my daughter about her dead mother." James kept his voice level, but ice ran through every syllable. "And you want to press charges because she defended herself? Your daughter committed assault. She's 6. Then perhaps you should teach her to control her temper." Harris's eyes swept over James, taking in the work coveralls, the oil still under his fingernails, the cheap digital watch. "Though I suppose impulse control isn't really valued in your community." The air left the room. Principal Anderson went pale. James felt something dangerous coil in his gut, something that knew exactly what Harris meant by your community, and wanted to show him what lack of impulse control really looked like. But Sophie was watching. Sophie was always watching. "We're done here." James turned to Principal Anderson, forcing his hands to unclench. "Is Sophie suspended?" "For today and Monday. School policy on physical altercations." Her eyes were apologetic, genuine regret in her lined face. "I'm sorry, James. For what it's worth, Tyler's suspended too. What he said was completely unacceptable. It doesn't help, but thank you." He carried Sophie out, Harris's voice following them down the hallway, making threats about lawyers and consequences and teaching people their place. James didn't look back, didn't trust himself to. In the truck, Sophie cried herself quiet while James drove home on autopilot, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Amanda's rental car was in the driveway. She'd gotten it fixed yesterday, could have left any time, but was still here, still staying for reasons James was starting to understand and fear in equal measure. She met them at the door, took one look at Sophie's face and pulled her into a hug without asking questions. James stood in his own entryway watching this woman comfort his daughter, and something in his chest cracked clean through. "What happened?" he told her. Watched her face go from concern to fury to something softer and more complicated. She knelt down to Sophie's level, hands gentle on the little girl's shoulders. "I'm so sorry Tyler said those things, but you know they're not true, right? He said you're pretending, that you'll leave like Mommy did." "I'm not pretending anything, and I'm not leaving." Amanda glanced at James, something uncertain in her eyes, a question she was asking without words. "Not unless your dad wants me to." Sophie turned to look at him, and James realized this was a moment that would shape something. He just didn't know what yet. "Miss Amanda can stay as long as she wants." Relief flooded Sophie's face. She threw her arms around Amanda again, and over his daughter's head, Amanda mouthed silently, "We should talk." Yeah, they should. But first, Sophie needed lunch and distraction. James made grilled cheese while Amanda set up a movie, and they sat together on the couch with Sophie between them, finally calm, while some animated thing played out on screen that James couldn't focus on because his mind was spinning through Harris's threats and his mother's surgery and the impossible mathematics of survival. His phone rang halfway through the movie. Work number. James stepped into the kitchen to answer. "James, it's Denise from HR." Her voice was strained, professional discomfort bleeding through. We need to discuss a complaint that was filed against you." His stomach dropped. "What complaint?" "A building tenant reported that you've been harassing female employees, made unwanted advances, created a hostile work environment." She paused, and James could hear her choosing words carefully. "James, I don't believe this for a second, but corporate is requiring an investigation. You're suspended pending review." "Suspended?" The word came out strangled. "Denise, I haven't harassed anyone. This is who filed the complaint." "I can't disclose that, but James," she lowered her voice, "the complaint came in this morning right after you left for the emergency, and it was filed by Kenneth Harris." The name hit like a fist. Harris, Tyler's father, the man from the principal's office. "That's retaliation. You know that's retaliation." "I know, and I know this is wrong, but my hands are tied. Corporate has a zero-tolerance policy. Until the investigation clears you, you can't be on property." "How long?" "Minimum 2 weeks. Could be longer." 2 weeks without pay. 2 weeks of bills piling up and Sophie's cardiology appointment coming due and rent that didn't care about investigations and Dorothy's surgery looming like a cliff edge. "Understood." "James, I'll expedite this as fast as I can. I'm truly sorry." He hung up, stood in his kitchen trying to remember how to breathe. Amanda appeared in the doorway, her face already shifting into understanding before he said anything. "What's wrong?" He told her, watched comprehension dawn, then fury ignite in her eyes like something catching fire. "He's punishing you for Sophie defending herself, for—" She stopped, the realization hitting her visibly. "For me. He's punishing you for having me here." "You don't know that." "Of course I do. Men like Kenneth Harris don't accept being challenged, especially not by—" She cut herself off. "By what? A black man in coveralls who didn't back down?" James heard the bitterness in his own voice and couldn't stop it. "Yeah, I know the type." Amanda moved closer, her presence steady in a way that made something in James's chest ease despite everything. "What can I do?" "Nothing. This is my problem." "James?" "I said no." He turned to face her fully, exhaustion and anger and fear all tangled up inside him. "I appreciate it, but this is exactly what I was afraid of. You being here, people seeing us together, them making assumptions and using it against me. I should have—" He stopped, couldn't finish that sentence because he didn't know what he should have done differently. Turned her away? Let her sleep in the rain? Kept her at distance so his life didn't get more complicated than it already was? "You should have what? Turned me away? Let me sleep in the rain?" Amanda's voice rose, sharp with something that might have been hurt or might have been anger. "Don't you dare make this my fault." "I'm not. I'm making it mine for not seeing this coming." "How could you have seen it? Harris is a vindictive—" "Daddy?" Sophie's voice from the living room, small and scared. "Are you and Miss Amanda fighting?" They both froze. James closed his eyes, counted to 5, forced his voice into something calm before he went to his daughter. "We're not fighting, baby. Just talking about grown-up stuff." "But you're mad." "Not at Miss Amanda. At a situation." He pulled Sophie onto his lap, felt her small body trembling. "Sometimes bad things happen to good people. That's not fair, but it's true. And right now Daddy's dealing with one of those bad things." "What bad thing?" "How did you explain institutional racism and retaliation to a 6-year-old? How did you tell her that the world would judge her father based on his skin before his character, and there was nothing anyone could do to change that except fight and hope and try not to break? A man told lies about Daddy at work, so Daddy has to take time off while they figure out the truth. Like when Tyler lied about me hitting him first? Kind of like that." Sophie's face scrunched with concentration, working through adult problems with a child's logic. "But the truth always wins. Miss Patterson says so." James felt his heart crack wider. His daughter's kindergarten teacher had filled her head with optimism that the world would spend years beating out of her, and there was nothing he could do to stop it except lie or tell her truth she was too young to carry. Sometimes it takes longer than we want, baby." Amanda had followed them into the living room. She crouched beside the couch, looking at Sophie with an expression that was pure tenderness. "Your dad is the best person I know. And the truth is going to prove that, okay?" Sophie nodded, reassured by adult certainty even when the adults themselves had none. She wriggled off James's lap and went back to her movie. Crisis averted for now. But James saw Amanda's hands shaking as she stood. They didn't speak for the rest of the afternoon, maintained careful distance while Sophie played, while James made dinner, while the day dragged toward evening with the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on both of them. After Sophie was asleep, 3 books, 2 glasses of water, 1 promise that Miss Amanda would still be here tomorrow, James found Amanda on the back porch staring into the dark. "I should go." Her voice was flat, defeated. "I've caused enough damage." "You haven't caused anything. Harris saw me with Sophie at school pickup yesterday. I could see him staring, making assumptions." She turned to face James, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And today, if I hadn't been here, he wouldn't have grounds for harassment claims. If I wasn't seen with your daughter, Tyler wouldn't have ammunition to hurt her. None of that is your fault. Isn't it? I walked into your life and brought complications you didn't need." James leaned against the porch railing, exhaustion making his bones ache. "You walked into my life and reminded me what it feels like to have help. To have someone who gives a damn. To not be alone in this." He met her eyes. "Yeah, there's complications. There's always complications. But I'm not asking you to leave." "What are you asking?" Good question. James didn't have an answer, didn't know what he wanted beyond making it through tomorrow and the day after that, beyond keeping Sophie safe and Dorothy alive and himself from drowning in debt and despair. "I'm asking you to stay until we figure this out. Both of us. Together." Amanda's breath caught. "James, I know it's complicated. I know we haven't known each other long, but Sophie needs you right now, and maybe—" He stopped himself before he could finish, before he could admit something he wasn't ready to say out loud. "Maybe what?" "Maybe I need you too." The words came out rough, scraped raw from somewhere deep. "Maybe I'm tired of doing this alone. Maybe having someone who understands what it's like to be exhausted all the time, to wonder if you're failing. Maybe that matters more than I want to admit." She studied him for a long moment, her face unreadable in the porch light shadows. Then, "I don't understand what it's like. Not really. I quit my job. You got suspended from yours. I have money in the bank. You're drowning in debt. How is that the same?" "It's the same because we're both terrified we're not enough." James pushed off the railing, moved closer but not too close. "You spent 9 years building walls so thick nobody could hurt you. I spent 3 years doing the same thing. Different materials, same prison. And you think what? We can save each other?" There was something sharp in her voice, something that might have been hope or might have been fear of hope. "I think we can stop drowning long enough to catch our breath." "That's not saving, that's just treading water." "Sometimes treading water is all you've got." Amanda turned away, gripped the porch railing like it was the only thing keeping her upright. When she spoke again, her voice had gone quiet, vulnerable in a way that made James want to reach for her and keep his distance in equal measure. "I have contacts. Resources." She pulled her phone from her pocket, turned it over in her hands. "I know people who know people. Harris might have money, but he's not the only one." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying one call, and I can have a lawyer who will make Harris's legal team look like kindergartners. Someone who specializes in wrongful termination and retaliation. Someone who will fight this for you." James wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the independence that was all he'd ever had full control over, but he thought about Sophie's confused face when Tyler mocked her, about 2 weeks without pay stretching into 4, into 8, about pride versus survival. "One call." The words felt like surrender and salvation. "But I'm paying them back. Every cent, even if it takes years. Deal." She made the call right there on the porch while James listened, her voice shifting into something professional and authoritative, the CEO she'd been before the river. She explained the situation in crisp sentences, asked pointed questions, and by the time she hung up, they had an appointment for Tuesday morning. Rachel Torres, best employment lawyer in Colorado. Amanda pocketed her phone, met James's eyes. She's also doing this pro bono because I helped her sister's company restructure 3 years ago, so you can't pay her back. Amanda, you can buy her coffee. That's the deal. James felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been wound tight since Denise's phone call. You're infuriating. So I've been told. A smile flickered across her face, there and gone. But I get results. They stood together in the cool night air, and James realized how close they were standing. Close enough that he could see the pulse jumping in her throat. Close enough that if he leaned in, his phone rang. James stepped back like he'd been burned, pulled it out. Denver General Hospital on the screen. Mr. Carter, this is the cardiac unit. Your mother's stable, but she's asking for you. Can you come in? He glanced at Amanda, saw understanding in her eyes before he spoke. I'll stay with Sophie. Go. The hospital at night was a different place than during the day. Quieter, more honest somehow. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as James walked to Dorothy's room, his footsteps echoing off linoleum that had seen too many people coming and going with news both terrible and mundane. Dorothy was awake when he entered, propped up on pillows, looking more alert than she had the previous night. The monitors beeped steadily, a mechanical heartbeat that was both reassuring and terrifying in its constancy. You look like hell, baby. Didn't sleep much. Neither did I. Turns out hospitals aren't designed for rest. She patted the bed beside her. Sit. Tell me what's wrong. He sat, careful not to jostle the IV lines, told her about Sophie getting suspended, about Harris, about the harassment complaint and the suspension from work. Watched her face cycle through anger and resignation and something that looked like bone-deep weariness. That's the world we live in. Her voice went bitter, edged with a lifetime of watching her son navigate systems designed to break people who looked like him. You be twice as good, work twice as hard, and still they find ways to tear you down. Mom, don't mom me. You know it's true. That management job you turned down 5 years ago, you could have had security, respect, a future. Instead, you're fixing toilets and getting accused of harassment by men who couldn't do your job with both hands and a manual. The old argument. James had heard it 100 times, knew every beat and counterbeat by heart. Dorothy had wanted him to take the promotion, wanted him to be the first in their family with a real career, wanted him to wear suits and have business cards and make her proud at church. I am doing my job, and I'm good at it. I know you are. Her voice softened, and James saw the fear underneath the frustration. But good doesn't matter when they decide you're disposable. He pulled his hand back, stung. Is that what you think? That I'm disposable? I think you're my son, and I'm terrified this world is going to break you the way it broke your father. His father had died of a stroke at 52, worked himself to death trying to prove he was worth the air he breathed, trying to be twice as good so nobody could say he didn't belong. James barely remembered him beyond a presence at dinner and a voice saying, "Work harder, be better, don't give them any reason." I'm not him. No, you're harder on yourself. Dorothy's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion winning. At least he could admit when he was tired. They sat in silence for a moment, the monitors beeping, a nurse passing in the hallway outside. Then Dorothy opened one eye, fixing him with a look that hadn't changed since he was 6 years old. There's a woman, isn't there? James went still. What? Sophie mentioned Miss Amanda on the phone yesterday, said she makes good pancakes and knows all the words to the astronaut mouse book. Both eyes open now, pinning him. You dating? It's not like that. Then what's it like? How did he explain Amanda? The woman who'd accused him and then apologized, who'd quit her job and stayed in his house, who'd become part of their lives so fast he still couldn't trace how it happened. She's helping with Sophie. That's all. James Anthony Carter, I raised you better than to lie to your mama. Despite everything, he smiled. She's complicated. We're figuring it out. She good to Sophie? Better than good? She good to you? James thought about Amanda standing in his kitchen offering partnership, about the way she'd looked at him on the porch, close enough to kiss if he'd been brave enough. Yeah, she's good to me. Dorothy nodded, satisfied. Then don't screw it up being stubborn. You get that from your father, this need to prove you can do everything alone. But baby, alone is just alone. It's not noble. It's just lonely. Mom, I'm having heart surgery in 2 weeks. Humor a dying woman. You're not dying. Not today, but someday. And when I do, I want to know you've got someone. That Sophie's got someone. That you're not grinding yourself to dust trying to be everything for everyone with nothing left for yourself. James felt his throat tighten. I'm trying. I know. But trying isn't the same as letting yourself be happy. She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. Linda would want you happy. Linda wanted a lot of things. She wanted to see Sophie grow up. She wanted to travel. She wanted... His voice broke. She wanted more time. And you're wasting yours feeling guilty for still being here. Dorothy's voice went soft, gentle in a way that hurt worse than anger. Baby, grief is allowed, but so is joy. They can exist together. You know that, right? James didn't answer. Couldn't. A nurse came in to check monitors, gave Dorothy something for pain. She drifted under, hand going slack in his. James sat with her until visiting hours ended, then drove home through streets gone quiet with late night. Amanda was awake when he got back, reading on the couch in lamplight. She looked up when he entered, bookmarked her page, set it aside. How is she? Alive. Needs surgery in 2 weeks. The kind that costs more than I make in 2 years. He sank onto the couch beside her, suddenly too exhausted to maintain distance or pretense. I'm starting to think the universe is testing how much one person can handle before they break. You're not going to break. How do you know? Because I've seen you carry weight that would crush most people. Because you get up every morning and choose Sophie over sleep. Because even when Kenneth Harris is trying to destroy you, you still read bedtime stories with funny voices. She shifted closer, and James didn't move away. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Don't you dare give up now. He looked at her, really looked. Saw the woman who'd been drowning in a river and found her way here, who'd walked away from everything familiar and stayed for reasons that were becoming clearer every day. Why are you here, Amanda? Really? Not the car breaking down or having nowhere else. Why are you still here? She was quiet for a long moment, her hands twisting in her lap. When she spoke, her voice shook with something raw and true. Because for 9 years, I've been pretending to be alive, going through motions, performing success while dying inside. And then you pulled me out of the water, and suddenly I could breathe again. Tears tracked down her face, no attempt to hide them. I'm here because you and Sophie reminded me what it feels like to matter. Not for what I can do or how much I earn, just for being present, for showing up, for being... A wet laugh escaped her. Just human. James reached out, wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing. I don't know what we're doing, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Me neither. She covered his hand with hers. But I know I don't want to leave. I know Sophie matters to me more than any company ever did. And I know that when I think about going back to Denver, to my apartment, to my old life, I can't breathe. So stay. For how long? As long as you want. As long as Sophie needs you. As long as... He stopped, couldn't finish. As long as you want me to? Yeah. Her gray eyes searched his face, looking for something James wasn't sure he could give, but wanted to try anyway. What are we, James? I don't know. But I think maybe we're figuring it out together. She leaned forward, and James met her halfway. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question more than an answer. She tasted like coffee and possibility, and something that felt like hope in a week that had tried to strip all hope away. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Amanda rested her forehead against his. That was... yeah. What do we tell Sophie? James thought about his daughter, about the hope in her eyes when she'd asked if Amanda was staying. The truth. That we care about each other, that we're taking it slow, that nothing changes how much I love her. He pulled back to look at Amanda. Can you live with slow? I quit my job and moved into your house on day 2. She laughed, the sound carrying equal parts humor and disbelief. I think slow might be beyond us. He laughed too, despite everything, despite Harris and his mother and the investigation and bills piling up. Amanda made him laugh, and that felt like its own kind of miracle, a small light in darkness that had been absolute for too long. They sat together on the couch until exhaustion pulled them under, Amanda's head on James's shoulder, his arm around her. When his alarm went off at 5 a.m., he woke to find they'd fallen asleep tangled together, and for the first time in 3 years, waking up didn't feel like lifting a boulder. Amanda stirred. What time is it? Early. I forgot. I'm suspended. No work today. She sat up, hair wild, his shirt rumpled from sleep. So what do we do? We survive. We fight back. We figure it out. He touched her face, felt the warmth of her skin against his palm. Together. Together. She echoed the word like testing its weight, seeing if it would hold. Despite Kenneth Harris and heart surgeries and everything trying to break them, James Carter believed it might actually be true. They spent Sunday in careful domesticity that felt both foreign and natural. Amanda made breakfast, actual breakfast, not just cereal and toast, while James helped Sophie with a school project she'd forgotten about. They went to the park in the afternoon, the 3 of them, and James watched Amanda push Sophie on the swings while his daughter's laughter carried across the playground like proof that joy could still exist in the middle of crisis. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, they sat on the porch again. It was becoming their place, the space where truth lived between them. Tuesday we meet with Rachel. Amanda wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. What do you want to accomplish? Get my job back, clear my name, make sure Harris can't do this to anyone else. That last one's going to be hard. Men like him have done this before and gotten away with it. Then we make sure he doesn't get away with it this time. She smiled, something fierce in her expression. There's the fight I was looking for. Monday passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Rachel Torres called to confirm their meeting and request documentation, work emails, performance reviews, anything that showed James's character and competence. Amanda helped him organize it, her CEO efficiency turning chaos into order. Tuesday morning arrived with October's first real cold snap. James, dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt instead of coveralls, felt like he was wearing a costume. Amanda wore a blazer over dark jeans, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the executive she'd been before the river. Rachel Torres's office was in a restored warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and steel beams that spoke of money and taste. Rachel herself was 39, Latina, with sharp eyes and sharper questions. She spent an hour going through James's documentation, asking about Harris, about the school incident, about everything that had led to this moment. Kenneth Harris has a pattern. Rachel pulled up files on her laptop, turned the screen so James could see. 2 harassment complaints settled in 2019, both against women who challenged him professionally, both paid off with non-disclosure agreements. She looked at James. He uses the system as a weapon. Files complaints he knows will be taken seriously, then watches while HR does his dirty work. Can we prove that's what he's doing to me? Not directly, but we can show pattern of behavior, show that your record is spotless, get testimony from coworkers, build a case that this is retaliation for you standing up to him. Rachel closed her laptop. I'll need you to write down everything that happened at the school, every word Harris said, especially the comment about your community. That's going to be important. James felt his stomach clench. You want me to make this about race? I want you to make this about truth. Harris made it about race when he looked at a black man and assumed predator. I'm just putting his assumptions on the record. They spent another hour strategizing, then left with a timeline. Rachel would file a formal response to the harassment complaint, request all documentation from HR, begin interviewing James's co-workers. The investigation would take at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. 2 weeks without pay. 2 weeks of watching savings drain away. 2 weeks of hoping truth mattered more than money and influence. In the parking lot, James leaned against his truck and tried to remember how to breathe. Amanda stood beside him, not touching but present, solid in a way that made the world feel slightly less like quicksand. What are you thinking? That I should have seen this coming. That I should have been more careful, kept my head down, not challenged him in front of people. You did nothing wrong. Doesn't matter if I end up fired anyway. James. She turned to face him fully, her expression fierce. You saved my life. You took Sophie to that art show even though you'd been suspended. You read stories with funny voices even when you're exhausted. You give grace to people who don't deserve it. Her voice cracked. You're good. And good has to count for something. In what world? In this one. In the world your daughter's growing up in. In the world we're building together, even if we're building it one day at a time with duct tape and hope. James pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, let himself lean on someone for the first time in 3 years. She wrapped her arms around him and held on like she meant it, like she wasn't going anywhere, like together might actually mean something more than just a word. They drove home in comfortable silence. Found Sophie in Patricia Scott's living room, drawing pictures while the older woman watched with fond patience. Sophie launched herself at both of them when they arrived, chattering about the butterfly that had emerged from the cocoon at school, about how Miss Rodriguez said metamorphosis was when something became what it was always meant to be. That night, after Sophie was asleep, James and Amanda sat in the dark living room and talked about things they'd never told anyone. Amanda spoke about the parking garage, about therapy that helped but didn't fix, about learning to live with fear as a constant companion. James talked about watching Linda die by inches, about the guilt of relief when it was finally over, about Sophie asking questions he didn't have answers for. They talked until words ran dry and silence was enough, until sitting together in the dark felt like its own kind of honesty. Wednesday brought Sophie's cardiology appointment. $847 to confirm what they already knew. Her heart murmur was stable, required monitoring but not immediate intervention. James paid with a credit card he'd sworn not to use, watched the balance climb toward numbers that made his chest tight. Thursday, Rachel called with updates. She'd interviewed 6 of James's co-workers. All had given glowing testimonials. She'd found security footage showing James in the basement during the time the harassment allegedly occurred. She'd discovered that the anonymous complainant, a woman named Jennifer Morrison, had received a $5,000 cash deposit the day before filing her report. We've got him, Rachel's voice carried grim satisfaction. Harris paid someone to lie. That's fraud, obstruction, witness tampering. I'm filing a motion to dismiss the investigation and demanding a formal hearing in front of the board. When? Monday, 10 a.m. Bring your documentation and your game face. James hung up, told Amanda, watched relief and determination war on her face. 4 days. She pulled out her phone, started typing. We need to prepare. Practice what you're going to say. Anticipate their questions. They spent the weekend rehearsing. Amanda played devil's advocate, throwing hard questions at James until he could answer without flinching. Sophie watched from the couch, serious and quiet, absorbing more than a 6-year-old should have to understand about injustice and fighting back. Sunday night, James couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios where everything went wrong. His phone buzzed at midnight, a text from Amanda. You're going to be fine. Truth wins, remember? He typed back, Sophie's wisdom. Smart kid. Takes after her dad. Monday morning arrived sharp and cold, October asserting itself with frost on the grass. James dressed in his only suit, 10 years old, bought for Linda's funeral, while Amanda helped Sophie get ready for school. They'd decided she'd go to Patricia's for the day, keep her routine normal, while the adults fought battles she shouldn't have to witness. The building where James worked looked different when he walked through the front doors as a visitor instead of an employee. Denise from HR met them in the lobby, her face apologetic and professional in equal measure. Conference Room B. The board's already assembled. The conference room held 7 people, 5 board members James had never met, the HR director, and Kenneth Harris sitting in the back row with a lawyer beside him. Harris's face went cold when he saw James enter, colder still when Amanda walked in behind him looking every inch the CEO she'd been, blazer sharp, heels clicking, presence that commanded attention without asking. Rachel Torres was already at the table, her files spread in precise order. She stood when James approached, shook his hand firmly. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." The board chair, a white man in his 60s with kind eyes and steel in his voice, called the meeting to order. "We're here to address the harassment complaint filed against James Carter and the response filed by Ms. Torres. Ms. Torres, you have the floor." Rachel stood, clicked through her presentation on the screen. Security footage showing James alone in the basement. Time-stamped emails proving he was working when the harassment allegedly occurred. Bank records showing Jennifer Morrison's suspicious deposit. Testimony from 6 co-workers, all describing James as professional, respectful, competent. Then she played her ace, the 2019 settlements. 2 women, both paid to stay quiet after challenging Harris. Both willing to testify now that they saw him doing it again. Kenneth Harris has a pattern of weaponizing HR complaints against people who threaten his ego or challenge his behavior. He did it to Emily Chen in 2019 when she reported him for making racial comments at a company dinner. He did it to Brenda Walsh when she pushed back on his budget recommendations. And he's doing it now to James Carter because Mr. Carter's daughter pushed his son after the boy mocked her dead mother. The room went silent. Harris's face had gone from cold to red, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. Rachel turned to James. "Mr. Carter, would you like to address the board?" James stood, felt every eye in the room on him, felt the weight of everything riding on this moment, thought about Sophie watching him read with funny voices, about Dorothy telling him he was worth more than the world said he was, about Amanda believing good had to count for something. "I've worked here for 9 years, fixed every broken thing in this building, showed up early, stayed late, never complained. I have dignity. I deserve respect." His voice was steady, certain. "Kenneth Harris saw me with a white woman and wrote a story where I'm the villain. Saw scratches on my arm from saving someone's life and turned them into evidence of violence. Saw me standing up to him and decided to destroy me." He looked at each board member in turn. "If this company values character, you'll see the truth. If you value money and influence over integrity, I'll know where I stand." The board chair studied James for a long moment, then turned to Harris. "Mr. Harris, do you have anything to say?" Harris stood, his lawyer's hand on his arm, trying to hold him back. "This is character assassination. I filed a legitimate complaint. You paid someone $5,000 to lie." Rachel's voice cut through his bluster like a knife. "That's not a complaint. That's fraud." The chair held up his hand. "Mr. Harris, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Ms. Torres will be contacting the police about potential criminal charges." Harris's face went white, then purple. "You can't. I'll sue. This is the consequence of your actions." The chair's voice was final. "Security, please." 2 uniformed guards appeared, flanked Harris and his lawyer. As they walked him toward the door, Harris locked eyes with James. The hatred there was pure and undiluted, a promise that this wasn't over, even though it clearly was. The door closed behind them. The chair turned back to James. "Mr. Carter, you're reinstated immediately with full back pay for the 2 weeks you were suspended. We'll also be issuing a formal written apology and adding a letter of commendation to your file. I'm sorry this happened. It should never have gotten this far." James felt his knees go weak. Amanda's hand found his under the table, squeezed tight. Rachel was smiling, satisfaction written across her face. "Thank you." The words came out rough, emotion he couldn't quite name making his voice shake. "Thank you." They left the building into October sunshine that felt warmer than it should have. James made it to the parking lot before the reality hit him. He'd won. Truth had actually won. Good had counted for something. Amanda pulled him into a hug in the middle of the parking lot, and James held on like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. Over her shoulder he saw Rachel giving them space, her expression knowing and kind. "You did it." Amanda's voice was muffled against his shoulder. "You stood up, and you won. We did it. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes wet. "That's what love is, James. Fighting for people when they can't." The word hung between them. Love. Too big and too soon and exactly right all at once. "Is that what this is?" "I don't know. But I know I'm not going anywhere. I know Sophie matters. I know you matter." She smiled through tears. "I know I want to be here for whatever comes next." James kissed her in the parking lot, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except the woman in his arms and the truth they'd fought for together and the future that was starting to look possible instead of just theoretical. When they pulled apart, he said the thing he'd been thinking since she knocked on his door that first night. "I love you too," in case that wasn't clear. "It wasn't, but I'm glad you said it anyway." They drove to Patricia's house to pick up Sophie, found her in the living room covered in crayon marks and joy, a new drawing spread across the coffee table. This one showed 4 people, James, Amanda, Sophie, and Dorothy, all holding hands, all smiling. "Grandma's coming home next week," Sophie announced it like a proclamation. "The doctor called. Her surgery went good and she gets to leave the hospital." James felt something crack in his chest. He'd been so focused on the hearing, on fighting Harris, that he'd barely thought about Dorothy's surgery happening Friday, about the fact that she'd come through it alive and was healing. "That's wonderful, baby." "And look," Sophie held up her drawing. "I put Miss Amanda in our family picture. Is that okay?" James looked at Amanda. She looked back, vulnerability and hope and fear all mixed together in her expression. "More than okay, Soph. That's exactly right." That evening they visited Dorothy in the hospital. She looked better than James had seen her in weeks, color in her face, strength in her voice, relief in her eyes when he told her about the hearing. "You won." It wasn't a question. "We won. Me and Amanda and Rachel. Together." Dorothy's eyes went to Amanda, standing quietly by the door. "Come here, pancake lady." Amanda approached the bed cautiously. Dorothy reached out, took her hand. "Thank you for fighting for my son, for seeing what I see, that he's good, even when the world says otherwise. He makes it easy." Amanda's voice was soft. "He's the best man I know." "Then don't let him be stubborn about being happy. That's my job as his mother, to tell you that he deserves joy just as much as he deserves dignity." Dorothy squeezed her hand. "You both do." They stayed until visiting hours ended, then drove home through streets turning gold with autumn. Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from a day of emotions too big for her small body. James carried her inside, tucked her into bed still in her clothes, kissed her forehead and whispered promises he finally believed he could keep. Amanda was waiting when he came out, standing in the hallway with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What happens now?" "Now?" James pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. "Now we figure out what comes next, together." "I'm still figuring out what that means." "Me too. But I think that's okay. I think we get to figure it out as we go." She kissed him soft and slow, a promise of time they now had to explore what they were building. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "I called my landlord today, gave notice on my apartment in Denver, told him I wouldn't be renewing my lease." James's heart stuttered. "You're staying? For real? If you'll have me, if Sophie's okay with it, if we can figure out how to build something real instead of just surviving crisis to crisis." "I'll have you. Sophie will be thrilled. And as for building something real," he smiled, feeling lighter than he had in 3 years, "I think we already started." They stood in the hallway holding each other while the house settled around them, while Sophie slept peacefully and Dorothy healed, and the future stopped being something to survive and started being something to build. Outside, October wind rattled the windows. Inside, warmth and hope and the beginning of something that looked like family.